16 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few wide receivers I looked at off the wire this week. The first receiver, Rashad Bateman of the Baltimore Ravens. I know he's been a hit or miss all season long, and he's been a deep ball threat, is Bateman. But coming off a big 3-catch, 80-yard or 2-touchdown game, he's definitely someone to recommend on the wire. Early in the season, he was pretty decent as Bateman. Then he's been phased out a little bit over the last few weeks here. But now with a big bounce-back game, so the last few games, Week 12 at the Chargers in that game, 2 catches, 43 yards, a touchdown. Week 13, inactive. Week 14, a bye. And then Week 15 at the Giants, like I said, 3 for 80 and 2 touchdowns. So Week 16, division matchup, big ball game. Pittsburgh Steelers, a Saturday ball game it's going to be. And I think he could go out there, he's Rashad Bateman, and be a decent threat for this Baltimore Raven team as a number 3 or 4 option in the offense. I'm not saying he's going to be a guy you go out there and put in your starting lineup, but definitely someone with upside, definitely someone with a rapport with Lamar Jackson. And Deontay Johnson, he just hasn't fit in, and he hasn't been a good trade for this Raven team. So right now, while Bateman's out there in 75% of fantasy leagues, he's an ad this week. The next ad, Quentin Johnston of the Los Angeles Chargers. So Johnston every week, he's just out there available on the wire, and he's coming off another solid performance with 10 targets in the tough loss versus the Tampa Bay Bucks in a blowout loss. So Week 13 at Atlanta, 2 catches, 12 yards. Week 14 at Kansas City, 5 catches, 48 yards, a touchdown on 7 targets. And then Week 15 versus Tampa, 5 for 45 and a touchdown on 10 targets. So Week 16, definitely a tough matchup versus a great defense in the Denver Broncos, and it's a Thursday night game, a short week. But this Charger team, they know they got to right the ship now. Losing 3 out of 4. This offense has to get going. And now with Ladd McConkey back in the lineup in Week 15's game where he found the end zone, I think the one-on-one coverage, he could take advantage of his Quentin Johnson. He's better as a number 2 wide receiver or 3 option instead of being that number 1 guy where he just isn't a guy. But him and Justin Herbert, over the last few weeks here, they got in the rapport now, and he's starting to make plays. And if you need a wide receiver, he's out there in 59% of fantasy league. Next receiver, Romeo Doubs of the Green Bay Packers. So Romeo Doubs, he's been in and out of concussion protocol over the last few weeks, but he came out with a big ball game in Week 15 in Seattle. So the last few games, Week 11 in Chicago, 1 catch, 17 yards. Week 12 versus San Francisco, 3 catches, 54 yards. Weeks 13 and 14 in play. And then Week 15, the big game at the Seahawks, 3 catches, 40 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So Romeo Doubs, he's number 2 wide receiver, arguably, in this offense for this Green Bay Packer team. At the end of the game, we saw Christian Watson go to the sidelines and hold his ankle, so we don't know how serious that is. Week 16, a good matchup coming up versus Saints. I give up the 7th most fantasy points to wide receivers on the season. And I think Romeo Doubs, as long as he's healthy and he's getting targets in this offense behind Jaden Reed, who's the number 1 wide receiver, I believe, for this Green Bay Packer team, he could be decent for fantasy owners. So with the next 2 weeks, good matchups coming up versus Saints and in Minnesota, who gives up the most points to receivers, believe it or not, is the Vikings in fantasy leagues. Romeo Doubs is a good ad this week. The next wide receiver I looked at off the wire, the Mario Douglas of the New England Patriots. I've mentioned Douglas a lot over the last few weeks here, and he is that number 1 option, arguably, in the passing game. Hunter Henry for this New England Patriot team. So the last few weeks here for Douglas, Week 12 at Miami, 5 catches, 62 yards. Week 13 versus Indianapolis, 4 catches, 20 yards. And Week 15 at Arizona, 3 catches, 11 yards, but he did find the end zone. So this offense, one of the worst offenses in the league, obviously, is New England, no doubt about it. But they don't have much going on over there, and there's a lot of games where they're trailing and chasing points. And this week, it's going to be more of the same at Buffalo, where the last couple weeks here, Buffalo's offense really exploded, and especially Josh Allen. He's playing in another universe right now, the way he's going out there and putting up numbers. So they're going to be trailing most likely a whole lot is this New England Patriot team. They're going to have to throw and play catch-up a whole lot. And I think the Mario Douglas, he could go out there once again and be a decent option in deeper leagues, stay off the wall. Get targets, he's going to make some plays. And if you need receiving depth, or even if you're in the deeper leagues and need someone that can help you out, he's out there in 78% of fantasy leagues. Next receiver, Jalen McMillan of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I mentioned McMillan over the last couple weeks here, and he's finally breaking out in his rookie season the last 2 weeks for this Tampa Bay Buc team, filling in for Godwin, who he knows obviously out for the year. So the last couple weeks, Week 14 versus Vegas, 4 catches, 59 yards, 2 touchdowns. In week 15 at the Chargers, a big game. 5 catches, 75 yards and a touchdown. So he's going out there, he's finding the end zone. He was a good player in college. Now he's translated it over the last couple weeks here for this Tampa Bay Buck team. And this week, a great matchup with the Dallas Cowboys, where their defense all season long has had trouble stopping people, giving up the 9th most fantasy points to wide receivers on the season. I know Dallas, the last couple weeks, the defense has played a little better, but Trevion Diggs, he's out for the season. And versus better teams, they're going to have trouble covering. So I think this week McMillan could be a good ad for owners. And he's out there in 92% of fantasy leagues. Next receiver, Calvin Austin of the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's out there in 92% of fantasy leagues as well as Calvin Austin. And we know he's a big-time speed wide receiver and a good slot guy. And we always knew Russell Wilson, he likes those speed guys and those slot receivers that can make plays on those quick-hitting slants or quick bubble screens and yard-after-catch ability. So 3 out of 4 games, double-digit fantasy points it's been for Austin. And now if Pickens returns here in Week 16, it could open up the offense and room for him even more, where the Ravens do give up the 3rd most fantasy points to receivers on the season. So the last few weeks, Week 12 at Cleveland, 3 catches, 78 yards, a touchdown. Week 13 at the Bengals, 2 for 29, a touchdown. Week 14 versus Cleveland, a catch, 4 yards. And Week 15 at Philadelphia, 5 catches, 65 yards. So like I said, Saturday ball game, great matchup at the Ravens, where I know they are high-powered offense, but they're vulnerable to giving up points. And that's what Calvin Austin does. He goes out there and he could be a deep ball threat. And like I said, Russell Wilson, he likes stretching the field with these speedy wide receivers. And Austin in deeper leagues is definitely an ad. In the final receiver I have as an ad is Jalen Coker, Carolina Panthers. So just an up and down season here for Jalen Coker, but he did have a big touchdown versus the Dallas Cowboys in a bad defensive play for them in Week 15. And Xavier Legette, we saw he left that ball game, and we don't know if he's going to play next week as well as Legette with a groin injury. So Coker, he might get an expanded look. Him and Bryce Young have a decent rapport, I believe, as well in this offense. In the last couple weeks, he was banged up and out of the lineup, was Coker, but now returning in Week 15, 4 catches, 110 yards on a touchdown. So big target is Jalen Coker. He's definitely got good speed, and he was a kid who obviously not highly touted coming out of college, but he's definitely someone that could go out there and make plays, and they're going to be trailing and chasing points, I believe, in this game versus Arizona. So right now, while Coker's out there in tons of fantasy leagues in 98%, and he's arguably the number 1 B option in this offense behind Adam Thielen, worst case scenario. I think he could be a decent pickup off the wire this week. So that's a few wide receivers I looked at for Week 16 of the fantasy football season.